Seminole Sidelines on the Osceola. Thanks for joining us on a Monday. Hope you had a great weekend. Rainy Sunday here in Tallahassee, but Luke Loucks, Stevie, and the kids arrived Sunday afternoon in the rain over at the Tallahassee airport. We were there. Kurt Weiler, I'm Bob Ferranti. And again, Monday morning, 11 a.m., Luke Loucks was there to reintroduce himself to the Florida State community. And I think it was a very, very interesting press conference with, really so much to unpack that we can't do it in one show. So we're going to hit on, I think, some storylines. We got some stories coming with some big picture takeaways. I hope you read Kurt Weiler's column from Sunday night about, why this really makes sense. And I kind of think that might be an interesting starting point, for us is maybe we need to talk about the baseline is, what do you expect as a fan, whether you're a season ticket holder, whether you're a casual fan watching on TV from around the state, around the country? What do you expect from Florida State basketball? Because I think that's a different conversation than a conversation that happens at North Carolina or Syracuse or some other schools. And it maybe helps us understand how Florida State got through this process to not just Luke Loucks, but identifying finalists and then narrowing it down. Kurt, you and I were in school here. We were at various points where we watched Florida State's successful runs. We saw Luke Loucks. I saw him in Atlanta win that ACC title in 2012. We've covered this program for a long, long time, but let's maybe just set that baseline of what makes sense for Florida State basketball as far as intangibles, personality traits, experiences. What is Florida State looking for in a successful coach?
I mean, I think to me, a big intangible that is not an intangible, rather tangible is I think having a null matters. I mean, this is now what? It's funny that this is 3 of 4 hires Michael Alford's made that has been a former Florida State student athlete now coaching the sport they played here. I think it just kind of worked out that way where I think all 3 were strong candidates. None of them felt like a reach. I mean, Lincoln, Luke were both kind of the clear candidates from the jump. That kind of were the top of the list guys that everybody was pointing to is like, I mean, your search probably starts here, right? I think that makes a big difference because I think a place like Florida State benefits especially in the non-football sports, but I guess you could say about football too, stability is a big thing. I think, Luke, I thought was pretty candid today, talk about, he didn't name names. He said there are certain schools we're not going to be in the recruitments for kids, like with certain schools of the world, but we're going to be, it sounds like in some ways the Leonard Hamilton model of player retention mattering, of landing high school kids and keeping them for 4 years, keeping them however long they're in college, be it 2 years, be it 3 years, be it 4 years, be it 1 year. And I think that is a big thing. Obviously the portal has changed that. And I think Leonard Hamilton didn't always adapt to that the best. And I think it was time for something new. And I think Luke, he mixes, a lot of the things Hamilton does well, caring about the people, but also bringing, I think, a lot of things that will set him apart. I think there's something to be said for having kind of a young man in the young man's game that is college basketball coaching right now. I mean, it's maybe in talking about it, he's never been a head coach. He's not coached in college, but talking today, I thought it was interesting. We can get to it. College and NBA might be closer than we realize in today's NIL world that we are living in. So it is interesting. And I think that was a compelling case to be made for why maybe the fact that he doesn't have college experience. I mean, he has such great NBA experience working for guys like Steve Kerr and Mike Brown that I think that more than makes up the difference.
I think what Florida State needed for this job is somebody who could not just be an identifier and a recruiter, developer of talent. And we think Luke can be a lot of those things, right? He needs to be a fundraiser, a man who shakes hands, goes out into the basketball community in Tallahassee, around the state, around the region,
yep,
and really cultivates, come out to games, buy a ticket, buy a season ticket, contribute to Battle's End toward the NIL efforts. We're in a really wild time with whatever revenue share looks like in April, with whatever NIL looks like moving forward as the marketing piece. I think Michael Alford says NIL will be more marketing moving forward. but I see charisma in a Luke Loucks. I think the candidate had to be charismatic, had to be more engaging in the community. I don't mean this necessarily as a knock on Coach Hamilton, but he more had a tighter circle, whereas I think Luke Loucks will have a very, very wide circle going out there. Financially, a lot that we don't know just yet. It is a 5-year contract, as it is with all these new coaching hires at Florida State. Don't have the financials, but not having a buyout, I think, was very important for Florida State to get a transition here. Leonard Hamilton doesn't have a buyout. You have to pay him. You don't have to pay a buyout to Luke Loucks on an NBA assistant contract. You're saving money moving forward, honestly, for player acquisition. I mean, in the big picture, you can go to donors and say, we don't need you to pay Luke Loucks' buyout to the Sacramento Kings. We need you to money to then go out and put together NIL deals for players who will play on Florida State's roster down the road. So I think financially, things are going to be tight from a basketball budget standpoint. That's why I kind of think we have to kind of set realistic expectations, because a Dennis Gates at a $14 million buyout was never really realistic, even though Florida State talked to a guy like Dennis Gates. They talked to a lot of different sitting college head coaches, sitting college assistant coaches, NBA guys. I think in the end, this ended where we thought it might, with a Luke Loucks, with a Sam Cassell. So I think, Kurt, that brings us to a second part that I want to hit on is, what are Luke Loucks' strengths? We've hit on a little bit so far. Let's talk strengths, but also let's go into, okay, 34 years old, hasn't been the college head coach. Who does he need to hire as an assistant? Who does he need to bring in to help surround him? Because he's going to run this thing 18 hours a day, but he needs other guys who are willing to jump in there in that same kind of passion and energy too.
Yeah, I know. I mean, when you talk about assistant coaches, he talked candidly. I thought it was probably wise of him today. He was able to dodge the question about kind of what he's looking for directly when he's asked, because he talked about, I don't want to talk about that until, like, as long as Coach Hamilton and his staff are still coaching. Obviously, Florida State plays tomorrow night. Luke will be there in the stands with Michael Alford. Not going to be involved. So he wants to be a fly on the wall there, but he'll be there however long the run in Charlotte is this week. And yeah, I think he talked candidly about, a major strength of Leonard Hamilton's was he was able to find assistant coaches and kind of that had his trait of accomplishing what he could and turn them into head coaches. You look at, Charlton Young is a guy who feels like he's on that track. Dennis Gates is having success at Missouri. Then Andy Enfield was at USC and is now at SMU as a former assistant turned head coach. He wants to be the same. I think the thing is, I do think there's some value in him saying, that there is similarities between the NBA and college nowadays. But I think, a person or two who's been in college coaching, who is an established assistant at a high major program, who could help him and be an advisor of sorts and guide him through that transition, and maybe is close to getting that head coaching job, I think would go a long way. You wonder, are there alumni he looks at? Obviously, I think the wild card, does he consider Stan Jones? Does Stan Jones maybe want to stay on staff there? He should have Leonard Hamilton some kind of, I don't know if the advisor role will be official or unofficial. It seems like that's still getting kind of nailed down, but whether he's on staff or not, I think Luke's quote about that today was, Leonard's going to give me advice whether I want it or not. That he was always going to be invested, I think, in the long-term success of the program after him, but especially it being a player he coached taking over, I think that will only amplify kind of Hamilton and how much he wants to help. And then I think the wild card here is the GM. Like, does he go a GM route? Because it feels like, obviously Florida State football's got a GM. A lot of college basketball teams have GMs. Does Luke have that in mind for his staff alignment of someone who helps kind of manage the portal and the roster management of it all and kind of things like that?
Seminole Sidelines on a Monday afternoon. Again, I understand there's some Twitter connection issues, so you may not be able to watch this live on Twitter today. Maybe you're catching us on YouTube, going backwards and listening to the podcast, Apple or Spotify. I think that's just a Twitter-wide problem. If you've, again, it may you may prefer to watch us on that platform as you're going about your workday. But we'll hit on a couple other topics. I think Luke talked about core values and some of his pillars of who he is, priorities as a coach. I thought there were some interesting storylines there, but we'll kind of just bullet point them real quick. Be present, be on time, be where your feet are. You hear a lot of coaches say that. That's Alani Alameda saying, I think, is be where your feet are. Sacrifice for the team. Don't be the individual player. I have to imagine that applies very much at the NBA level, right? Where you've got a lot of high-end contract guys, but you have to make the individual the team guy. I thought that was a really interesting thing that clearly he's probably picked up from Steve Kerr and Golden State back in the day. Have that ultra competitive mindset. All athletes have some level of competitiveness, but have that just insanely competitive mindset. Do your job, no whining, no excuses. I think you attribute that in part to Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll. Again, you can tell Steve Kerr has brought his staff to various high-end coaches, guys who have won Super Bowls, guys who have won in different sports. I think this is pretty interesting that coaching staff surround themselves with people from other sports just to pull together leadership concepts of how to develop people, how to develop the athlete, how to win games. Last one is find joy. It should be fun. It's a kid's game at the end of the day. I think Luke basically said you're just playing. You're just trying to put the ball in the hoop. It's a little bit more complicated than that at the end of the day, but the simple thing is enjoy what you're doing day to day. I thought that was a really interesting, kind of one of my big takeaways. Kurt, is there something, and we heard from Luke for an hour this morning. It was a really, really a lot of detail there, and we'll try to unpack a lot of it in the coming days. But was there something that stuck with you as far as a takeaway from today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I think he came off well. I mean, I didn't cover Luke. I know you covered Luke some. I didn't cover him. I thought he came off very well. I thought it was a impressive press conference. I think he said a lot of the right things. I think a lot of what, I mean, I talked about, I think a lot of what Leonard Hamilton wants to do or did in running his program, he wants to do too. He values high character. He values the people, clearly from his mantras. That speaks to, I think, how he values the attitudes and the characteristics of the people he's bringing into the program beyond basketball. And I think that's important at a place like Florida State. I think if Florida State's gonna be competitive, that is a very important piece. But I think also he brings, I mean, the NBA experience of he laid out pretty clearly what he's looking for in the offense. It was pace and space, it was attacking the paint, and it was there's a fourth one now I can't remember off the top of my head, but what did he say? He said, when you like boil basketball down to like the granular level, it really comes down to efficiency and possession. It's very analytics based. And that I think is not Leonard Hamilton. Leonard Hamilton's from a different era of college basketball in that regard. So I think it will be, I mean, that makes sense coming from the NBA that he's so analytics driven. I think that's something we've seen with a number of other coaches. I know, Todd Golden, the Florida coach, when he's come in here, he talked a lot about analytics. It seems like that's the trend of how things are going. It's very modern in college basketball, and I think is a big deal. But I think a big thing too, that near the end of the press conference, I know he talked about he met his wife at Florida State. She was a swimmer the first day he was here. I thought, I hadn't talked to anyone. You imagine that this is a dream job for Luke. This is a job that he could want to be in for a long time. And I think what did he say today? I think he said today, like, it made it clear, like, I'm not trying to parlay this into a better job. He said, I hope this is the last job I ever take, was something to that effect. And I think that speaks volumes about why a Luke Loucks, the upside of a Luke Loucks, even if there are the uncertainties relative to other guys who could absolutely use Florida State as a stepping stone. It just doesn't, it never seemed right that would be the case for someone like Luke. And that seems to indeed be the case. That, I mean, he envisions himself as a lifer if things go well.
Yeah, I think he talked about, you mentioned pace and space. He said you want to attack the paint,
Yeah.
easiest, the best, most efficient shot. in the game is the free throw, because if you attack, you might get that foul call. Yes, you like the free throws. Yes, you like dunks and layups, the high percentage shots. He talked about loving the kick out three, basically the penetrating, and then, oh yeah, somebody forgot to cover the wing, getting that clean shot from 3-point range. Talked a lot about just various efficient moments where you can find efficiency within the sport. I thought, did he talk a little bit about this today? Because this is sort of running together. I thought it was one cute kind of anecdote where he's saying the same couch is still in Leonard Hamilton's office as when Leonard was getting on Luke about his turnovers. And I vaguely remember Leonard saying something to the effect of, now when we first got Luke, he was throwing the ball in the stands. That Luke was a little bit raw. He was kind of a high school football quarterback in addition to point guard. So for Luke to talk about that same sofa is still in Leonard's office. He brought Stevie into the office, recently, whether that was this year or prior All-Star break, and they got to sit down and kind of share some wisdom with Coach Ham. Nothing has been identified as far as what Leonard Hamilton's title will be. I think the role is going to be significant in a far smaller amount of time. You can't expect Leonard to be there 70, 80 hours a week moving forward. I don't think that's what he would design it to be. But I think we'll see Leonard Hamilton there. I think, fans have asked us on the message board. We asked today, will there be a general manager? I think that's going to be something we will see within the contract. There will be an assistant coaching pool, but to our understanding, if there is a GM, it will have to fold in somehow within that assistant coaching pool. So is there another position? Is there an allocation of salary? At this point, I think we're going to answer no, but to be determined as to how they work that out financially. I think there's a lot of still questions moving forward. Again, we don't have a contract. Some folks have asked, what's the player reaction from the current guys? Again, they flew out to Charlotte, I believe, just before Luke and Stevie and the family and Michael Alford got in. So some of the questions you're asking are good ones, folks. We just don't have answers for them yet as far as what are the players thinking? Which players do we think might come back or not? But Luke did address re-recruiting, retention of players, having some of these conversations. He'll be there in the stands Tuesday night. At some point, he's going to meet these guys. At some point, he's going to sit down with these players. I'm sure he doesn't want to be a distraction, but the recruiting process is important as far as, hey, I've watched a lot of film of, let's just name somebody who's coming back who has eligibility. Malik Ewan, Taylor Bowen, Daquan Davis, AJ Swin. I mean, just think about anybody who's got eligibility left. There's a true conversation to be had, whether you think that guy's jumping in the portal and wants more money, or maybe he's really open-minded and thinking about what's the future with a guy who's got some NBA rings, who's worked for Steve Kerr and Coach Brown. I think that will prompt some guys to think. And that's going to be an interesting thing for us to watch, is just how does this roster come together? And he's got just a narrow window here to re-recruit. The portal opening once the tournament went into the week 2. And then
2 weeks from today.
So, man, there's just a lot going on in a short amount of time for Luke to figure this all out. What do you think, if you're a player, if you're a parent of a player, what do you think a player wants to hear from Luke Loucks? Because a player has been through a lot this year. Maybe if you've been here a few years, you've been through quite a lot, right? What do you want to hear about stability, about what this program can be moving forward, if you're hearing what that kind of one-on-one conversation talking point might be about the future of Florida State basketball?
I mean, like you said, you have to imagine that Luke's NBA background and the guys he's known and the guys he's coached. I know. I mean, there's been somebody. I know he's quite close with De'Aaron Fox on the Kings. I know he obviously had a relationship with Steph Curry and those guys in the Warriors. Like, do some of those NBA guys come to Tallahassee in the offseason and check in on Luke? Like how much? I mean, that feels like it could be something of a recruiting tool potentially for him to use. But in the interim, yeah, I think you want to hear a lot of what he said today about, I mean, kind of adapting to the modern game, if you will, and caring about the analytics. And obviously Luke is a guy who knows what it takes as a coach, like coaching those guys to get to the league. And I think that's a big part of it. I think the hope is too, you would imagine, like we talked about, I think Luke will be more active in fundraising and maybe can improve that budget. That was never Leonard Hamilton's favorite thing to do. You know, it's so like it, but if he puts in the time, I mean, how much is the support there, and how much can that change maybe the budget Florida State's operating with as a program, and upgrading the facilities and you know, like upgrading the roster and all things of that sort. I think that's where a lot of it comes down to.
I think to that point, we'll maybe wrap up there, but let's look at Michael Alford's recent hires. Yes, Brooke Wyckoff was here, so it was an easier transition, but she's been active with her coaches club, the basketball community, a lot of people she's known going back to when she was a player. You can draw some parallels there to what Luke might know and do, because he remembers a lot of faces back when he was a player here, 2008 through 2012. Similar to Link Jarrett, you know, Link being a player here in the early 90s, I think he has been able to connect with people in the community, help with fundraising, NIL. It's very interesting, again, going back to your original point early, that Michael Alford wants to look at the big picture, at the top possible candidate across the country. And in the end, you do sometimes come back to the best candidate has a Florida State tie, has those abilities to go out and be a fundraiser. I would even say Brian Penske was a great hire outside of the family, but Coach Penske goes out very connected to his coaching club, very connected to the soccer community as far as bringing in money and building things, asking for and getting a lot of things that the soccer program needs to continue to build that program. So I think that's probably a good stopping point for us Monday afternoon. Again, a little bit of a shorter show for you. Thanks for watching Seminole Sidelines on the Osceola's YouTube channel. Hopefully the Twitter machine will be back up next time we jump in here to talk with you. Spotify, Apple. If you are watching on YouTube, thank you. Please, please, please hit like and subscribe. We're trying to grow this channel with more and more shows. We'll try and get you some nice interviews down the road.
Maybe a Luke Loucks at some point.
Maybe a Luke Loucks, which
he's
I think
got to breathe. He's got a lot going on, but maybe he'll prioritize. Maybe we're like number 15 or 16 on his to-do list. You never know.
Did he say something to the effect of he slept like 9 hours in the last 3 nights or something like that?
I think that's what he said. And it's probably going to be his next 6 weeks, you have to imagine. I thought you were going to say that he said he's putting us through workouts before preseason to show us what it's like firsthand, which, like, I better already start training now. Probably already too late for me.
Yeah, let's be honest. You don't want to see me out there. I'm going to nominate maybe some subscribers who have better basketball skills than us can enjoy an opportunity out there on the court with Luke's. I will enjoy the film session where I can better understand the philosophical things, but maybe don't put me out there on the court to run or to learn physically. I like to learn.
If our media core gets through that without an injury, then that's a win. Whatever happens, that's a win.
Everybody needs to stretch the Achilles, and lots of stretching. Well, again, thanks for watching Osceola YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple, all that. Go to theosceola.com. If you're not a subscriber, Osceola 30 for 30 free days of the Osceola. Fish has a nice message board post on a lot of different things. He dove into some basketball too, as well as recruiting. We got a lot of updates on recruiting there. We've got our football position by position preview series is going strong. I think we're through offensive line, quarterback, running back. We'll kind of move through offense into defense. And then a week from today, we will be sitting down with Mike Norvell and the football assistant coaches on Monday the 17th, right before spring practice really ramping up. So a lot of reasons to be in as an Osceola subscriber, to be reading not just all the stories, but the message board posts, and get the full Osceola experience from guys like Kurt, myself, Patrick Burnham, Nick Carlisle, and of course, Jerry Cutts. Jerry was at the press conference today with us. You'll be seeing some of his coverage in the coming days. Again, we appreciate you watching. Take care. Have a great week.